I'm Lamar Hartwell. Welcome to the Body Intelligence Summit. In this session, I will be interviewing Susan Harper, who I am really delighted to have be joining us here on the summit. And she is a woman who holds so much knowledge and wisdom and expertise in the field of movement and embodiment, and we'll be with her on video. So those of you who are on video, you'll get a chance to experience some of what Susan has to offer in a visual capacity. And I welcome all of you who are here with us today, whether you're on video or audio. I am imagining this will be a rich experience. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
I want to say a little bit first about Susan Harper and who she is. Susan Harper is a continuum movement teacher, heart-soul counselor, creative instigator, and inspired teacher of perceptual and movement inquiry. Since 1975, Susan has been teaching internationally and contributing to the development of continuum movement, which was originated by Emily Conrad. Susan is the creator of Continuum Montage and developer of Body of Relating, Body of Perception, and Living Dreams seminars. In these events, fresh, heart-based perceiving and moving instantly affects how we relate and our fundamental sense of belonging. The emphasis on somatic awareness, soulful movement, and the skills of intimacy. The practices open vital new ways of perceiving, creative imagination, and a deep capacity for presence, resonance, and love. All right, there's a little bit about Susan, and I would like to pass it over to you, Susan, to share with our listeners or viewers about Continuum and your work with Body of Relating as well. If you could share an introduction about the work that you do.
Okay, thank you so much. I have great appreciation to be part of this, summit. Am I? Okay, all right. So one of the kind of really fascinating things about Continuum is the way of meeting what we've lived in for such a long time, and in our languaging we call this, what I'm tapping here, my body. We call our body a body as if it was an object rather than an extraordinary place where we can meet the unknown. One of the ways we used to describe a continuum dive is this capacity to be like a somanaut who travels into the mystery of everything that's in here, all of the 70 trillion cells that are humming with awareness and movement and in a process of exchange and play, to be diving into the mystery of continually interrelated with the earth, with the waters inside, with the waters of the planet, with the minerals in of us, the exchange of air as we exchange with the green ones in the living process, and to be able to feel what it is to live as a living process that's so deeply interconnected with its context. We have so many versions of our own bodies and each other, and we suffer when we live inside of a narrow version of description, a narrow version of how I think about my body or yours or myself or somebody else. And most of our suffering comes from living in too narrow of a version. And the totality of reality, the richness and fullness of what's here and what is to be experienced in the living process of life is such a profound place to play. I'm so grateful for all the years in Continuum to have a creative context to address the body, not as the body is known culturally by appearance and limitations of description, but to be able to enter and taste the living creative process that's alive at every moment. That kind of creativity that started, you take a sperm and an egg and the mystery of how all that comes together to grow the complexity of this kind of an organism that can think and love and dream and imagine and relate. So our primary nature is one of relational connection, how we are relating to the elements, how the elements are relating through us, how we relate through every one of our sensory portals. So an example, this goes a little bit in the direction of the body of relating, that the way in which I see you literally, if I see you in a really high focal gaze, if I see you and the entirety of the context, if I see you and allow you to come in and touch me, that very way that I perceive in my eyes is a creative engagement. And what I see begins to change by how I see. So how I listen, how I smell, how I touch, each of these opens a portal of relationship to the whole in a different way, and is a form of profound exchange with our planet, with each other. And all of our senses are deeply rooted. They have a heart home in our heart, a place where we are set up in the heart to be primarily aesthetically attuned. There's a Greek word called aesthesis, and it means to gasp in wonder at the beauty, to see something and to be so touched by the beauty of the way a leaf is trembling in the wind, or the way the light is moving on the water, or the curve of someone's movement in a moment, or the way someone's voice touches you. That moment of aesthesis is such a deep aesthetic resonance. We receive the world and are touched by the world, and therefore touch the world. That the way in which I allow myself to become touchable and touching becomes a portal of engagement and play. And every one of our 70 trillion cells are kind of humming with this form of exchange. They're humming with life, with the nourishment, with exchange of what they let go. And we have, they say, whoever they are, 70 trillion cells, and they're each humming with a kind of field of awareness. And we're often very busy thinking our already known thoughts. Da-da-da, da-da-da. And when we drop into this hum of life and exchange and the many different processes of life happening, we start to notice a different interiority. There's a different experience, and the possibility to ride on a kind of ongoing creative flux that is continually giving birth to the very many extraordinary species of this planet, to the many different kinds of audible, visual, textural, scented flavors of the planet. There's just a huge creative flux that we can get a little ride, a creative ride, by tuning in more deeply to this interiority that's connected to the whole planetary body and really to beyond. And there's such a strong field of awareness that's kind of ongoing. And like, for example, I don't have to be aware to breathe. Breathing, the universe is breathing me, but I could bring my conscious awareness there. I don't have to be consciously aware when I'm sleeping. I don't have to be aware of how am I going to digest my breakfast earlier. I don't have to be aware of how I'm metabolizing. The deep intelligence is operating all the time. So when I can bring my conscious attention in and feel and sense the magic and mystery of what seems so ordinary, digesting, thinking, heart beating, all of it. Don't have to be aware of it. It's already ongoing. And when I bring my consciousness in there to this nonverbal flowing state that's already ongoing inside, when that happens, when I bring my consciousness in there, I'm landing in a greater field of awareness. And that somatic nonverbal state is akin to the state that's spoken about in many spiritual practices, where we rest into the just deepest, most primal ground of being, and from which all creation flows. And so in movement, we have the gift of being able to take a ride, like whoosh, all of a sudden I'm in a movement, and one movement delivers itself, especially as I feel it, into another. And as I feel in a more subtle level, then other more subtle movements that maybe I've never even known about can begin to slowly present themselves and articulate. And we can find ourselves moving in a stream in the fluid dynamics that operate inside water, inside air, inside the energetic field. The osteopaths are all tuning in to the deep lung tides of health and wholeness that are streaming in us all the time. It's a form of dreaming while we're awake in movement.
Wow, thank you, Susan. I feel like I just went on a ride listening to you. Yeah, such a rich, poetic ride that I just experienced in receiving what you were sharing. And I appreciate the invitation that you're inviting people to come into, rest into, open into, in themselves, in their bodies. That is certainly very different than the daily grind. And it has I can feel the earth breathing, not just myself breathing, as I feel the place that you're inviting into, and yeah, really get the richness of the way that you're working with people through continuum and body of relating that creates a space where people can open to these subtleties and expand their senses as well, which is really at the heart of this topic called body intelligence. Is an invitation for people to, for all of us, to recognize the incredible organisms that we live in and who we are, and how not only do we have the opportunity to have this felt sense and this whole other level of sensitivity to our sensory experience of being alive, that we can also feel that with the world around us and the planet at large. I particularly was appreciating that piece that you were speaking of with connecting, relating to this way within ourselves to our surrounding, and that feels like a particularly delicious aspect of this topic that I would love to have you elaborate on. As it's a new arena that would be valuable for the listeners to get to hear more about, around the connection between our own beings and our own bodies with the planet body, the global body that we share together.
I'd love to speak about that. It's one of my favorite themes to explore, to inquire into, because there is no organism separate from its context. Organism and environment are utterly, totally related. There's not a way that we can be a body not connected. As a body, we're already completely, totally, 100% interconnected. The minerals in us to the minerals of the planet, the air of my breath is the living green song of every living green being offering its oxygen, and I'm breathing that life in, and I'm offering my out-breath to that life. And the waters of the planet as they move in us, and the extraordinary wisdom of water, its capacity to make a body and to be a kind of sense organ between the cosmos and the planet, its capacity to be in that constant movement of the tides, which then are our own tides that are dancing in that. And one of the main gifts is the capacity of perceiving, how I catch that connection. It's like we're already interconnected as a body, utterly, totally. I am a planetary body. I'm an expression of the planet just as much as any green being, as any tree, bush, animal. I'm an extension and expression of the whole of the planet in a human configuration that still has all the evolutionary gifts of every other kind of life form that has come before me. And we have a kind of see-feel capacity. I can see a tree just outside my window here. And when I look, I could go at one level to the name tree, which is a more categorizing, classifying level, or I can go see, feel. I see the tree, I feel the branching, the greening, the barking, the rooting, the eating of light, the drinking of water. I can feel the resonant movement of living process that's going on inside this tree, and the way the wind is touching and caressing and moving the branches of that tree. And in the see-feel moment, it's beginning to move more. As I feel it, there's a shimmer, there's a corresponding response inside me. There's an impression that comes from the color, from the movement that I'm seeing, from the vitality, from the life that's occurring there. And that particular very unique tree makes its own unique impression in my system, in my cells as I see that. There's a tremor and a dance and a process. And both that tree and myself and you, all of us are also in a relationship with gravity at this very moment. We're always negotiating at a very subtle level, like where are we in the song of gravity? And I like to think of gravity as the force of belonging. It's a very strong, attractive force that says, I have a place for you, and it's called here. And it's offered to every one of us equally, each one of us, each one of you listening and viewing, to just take a moment to feel your dance in gravity that gives you a place to land, to rest, that offers support, that offers a place where we can root and be connected, where we can receive the support of this land and this connection with the planet. And in that dance of belonging, of the gravity story, I'm constantly, every little shift I make, I'm in a conversation with that. The weight of my body gives me a way to feel the primal connection. And it's one of the things that the body asks, before it asks, who am I? Is it asks, where am I? Where am I? Where am I in relationship to gravity? Where am I really in relationship to light? Where am I in relationship to fresh air? Where am I in relationship to nourishment, to food? Where am I in relationship to love? It's a relational body at every moment. It's constantly asking, how can I relate? How can I stream in? How can I receive the nourishment of the surroundings? How can I let go? And how can I offer what's inside of me to my context, to the surrounding? And if you think about, since I have the tree outside there, you think about a little seed. And we take maybe an acorn seed that's been its little seed self for some period of time. And it's offered up down into the ground. And it lets go of its seed identity and its seed form as a body. It dies as that seed form. It's watered. And what grows is simultaneously two directions. One part begins to root, and another part is called by a light that it can't yet see. So one part, we're deep in the dark of the earth as the seed. One part is called to root and make a deeper belonging, and another part is called by the sun to rise. And every one of us dances between these two forces, this force of belonging and deep, dark, rooted fertility, connection to the earth, and the other one that's called to the light and to rise with water in it, to rise to eat the sun and the energy and to bring the inner sun of our life force out into play. And that movement for us, to be able to be aware of that, those two directions of I'm dancing all the time between where's the support of gravity and where is the space that I express into and that I receive from and that I exchange with. And each way that the way that we play in our senses is so important. One of the things is that we get hypnotized into a kind of dullness in everyday activity. We can kind of become numb to the level of mystery that surrounds us and that's inside of us, and to the kind of astonishing miracle that it is to be alive. And so with the senses, I can see through category, as I named before, or I can play with the way of seeing deeper into the life and being touched by. And for all of us, every day we're surrounded, even if we live in a city, somewhere nature is occurring. It's happening all around us. And that nature is full of the creative imagination of creation and destruction, of life and death, of things giving birth and transforming. And that's our deepest nature. Our own nature is primarily nature. And we're a fractal of that expression. So part of the mystery is, how can I show up? Like, let's say I have an everyday activity to do, like I've got to wash the dishes. And I can be just, in the functional mode of doing a dishwashing and thinking about 10 million other things. Or I can be in my hands, very fully in the movement with that heat of the water, the miracle of water. I can be with the slipperiness of that soap. I can be with the process of the movement of the dance of the everyday activity. And I have such a different experience of showing up to be 100% with what are my hands actually doing here, and what are they touching, and what are they being touched by. And it takes just a moment, like, yeah, water, we know water, we live with water. We live with it so much we make it into a commodity and we sell it and we do strange things with it and we forget that it's an astonishing miracle. So there's something about relating perceptually, opening the door of perception to be very awake and alive in the beauty and in the particular unique texture that water has. Just as an example, I mean, every time you slide your hand into the water to do those dishes, if you have a dish pan full of water, it's like the way that the water receives you utterly doesn't stop. It's like, oh, that's a teacher of receiving. And everywhere you look, there's another teacher in nature to offer another piece of a piece of the whole, a gift of the whole, of the many activities that we are and that nature is.
Thank you, Susan. Again, your descriptions are so beautiful and rich and full and inviting to step into this whole other field of awareness. I am particularly wanting to point out that piece of the relationship between our bodies and the earth body that you were elaborating on, and how important it is that in this time and in our culture where we have been taught and encouraged to put more attention on our cognitive abilities and be more up here and less embodied. And there's some pushing away that most of us have done from our experience on a sensation level of what's actually occurring within us in our bodies, more or less experiencing the sensations of our environment. So I loved how eloquently you were describing what's occurring there. And one of the big things is that it's not like we need to effort to make that happen. It's already happening all the time. And it's really a matter of bringing our attention in towards ourselves and towards that experience. And another thing that stood out to me as you were speaking is how many people on the planet are feeling alone and are really craving, feeling that sense of connection and long for unity and belonging, and that the strong impulse to reach outside of ourselves to then get that sense of fulfillment of belonging and connection, versus to go this way with it and recognize that by actually by being sensitively aware of what's going on and occurring on a sensation level within our bodies and these incredible trillions of cells that are always dancing and moving together, by dropping into that space, that we immediately do feel not only more connected here, but more connected out here to those that are around us, to nature, to the earth body, to our communities. And it's such an important piece, especially as in the American culture, we're so driven to not only have our attention outside of ourselves, but also to consume in order to feel that sense of okayness or that sense of fulfillment. So thank you again for your rich descriptions of that, so people can be even more sensitively aware of that, and that invitation to drop into that space, which is ultimately the end result of being aware of our body intelligence and this full spectrum intelligence of what is occurring by just being alive, that there's an appreciation and a gratitude that is available to us all the time by experiencing the richness of that, as well as not taking for granted some of the simple things that you were just describing, like water and clean air. And my hope is that by all of us becoming more aware and honoring these incredible bodies that we live in, the more that we can be aware of the earth body and make different decisions accordingly, so that we live in a more sustainable world.
Yes. So I'm going to play off of what you're saying here, that because it's organism context, and in one sense we are increasing our capacity to relate to what is so-called outside and inside. And this is one of the reasons why I think the see-feel piece is so important. It's like, as I see you, that I let myself simultaneously feel the impressions that come, the life that's moving. It's like I play with this moment of, how can I be with you? How can I be deeply with you and be deeply with myself simultaneously? So that we have a natural longing. That's how we're built. We have a longing. We all have to eat, and we all have to drink. We all have to breathe. Everything comes into us from the outside, in the sense of our nourishment comes from the planet, our housing, our clothing, our food, our air, and how we can take that in and move in that, deeply eat that with appreciation and attention, and offer our gifts, our breath back, our voice back, our insights back, so that we keep increasing the exchange. We keep increasing the gift giving and the gift receiving process, that all life is really built on exchange. The fire is eating wood and air in order to live. It's like a process, and it gives off its energy and its warmth and its vitality. So everything eats and everything is eaten, so to speak. There's a gifting process. Part of the process is to become more sensitive, to become more perceptive, more touchable, so that I really do allow the sounds of this world to touch me, and the sights of this world and the textures of this world. And as you were naming before, sometimes we had really difficult contexts. Sometimes we're maybe in a difficult context where we don't want to have relationship with the context we're in. So we begin to close down. We start to shrink. We shrink our eyes, we shrink our ears, we shrink our skin, we harden. And then we start to live in an armored, too much in our own little bubble. We're not in the great flow anymore. We're not in the deep exchange. And it's often in that moment we have to process the difficulty, the difficult sensations that have come from ways of being related to that didn't feel good. And then that offers another process of how do I have a rich range of sensation by being so connected to many different aspects of life that I can more easily then allow the difficult sensations to be metabolized, to be felt. I have a bigger, wider net of sensation, of the sensations of being alive and connected and spacious and rooted and belonging, that I can actually enjoy the moment of a longing for the next part of my life, for the next creative process, for the next depth of relationship. That we dance between longing and belonging, and in some ways we're like learning how to really deeply belong to our longing and let the longing take us to the next level of our creative and emotional and contextual and relational life. And so sometimes in building in the sensitivity to be more sensitive, to be more touchable, then I also need to have a very deep relationship with gravity, because that gives me more support. And often there's issues, psychological issues, I don't feel enough support. And I would say when that psychological issue is occurring, to become somatically and physically curious, like how am I receiving the support of the ground right now? How are you, like as you're moving, as you're sitting and listening, as you're with this process, how are you, what happens when you tune in and you allow yourself to feel the support of the chair, the support of the ground, the support of this deep earth holding your shiny, tender, vulnerable, shimmering, sensitive nervous system that's in an exchange and that's in a process with life itself, that we need to be able to feel tangibly the process of support, and to allow the equanimity of the earth that can hold us with such a presence, holds all of us in all of our states with such a presence, that I can root into that presence. And in the presence capacity, that I can then really support the compassionate and empathic and highly attuned nervous system that lets me also be with something that's more tender or tremulous or scary, like to allow when I have the moment of fear that arises to be able to really use the weight of my bones and the deep substance of my bones to help my scared little nervous system have some support and settle and sense of belonging, that the earth is always there ready to offer us in its deep lap of belonging. And that the moment when fear arises, we often toss up into spinning into the future and we've lost the now. And our sense process keeps bringing us back now. Gravity is always now. It's not tomorrow. It's not yesterday. It's always now. It's a great place to help oneself get back to, okay, right now, and I'm scared. And can I let all that scared up-regulating energy be held in this deep, strong support that's underneath there, and have a heartful, kind, caring, loving, hearted process for whatever in me is scared. Oh, you're scared. That's all that's happening. You're scared here. There's energy moving. You're bubbling. You're and here we are. And I'm bringing you an attention and an awareness that's not scared, meaning inside myself. Yeah.
I love your emphasis on gravity. That's not something I've given much attention to, and I see the gift there in having that awareness and how it'll support that sense of grounding. One of the biggest things that I invite people into around getting more connected to our body is to ground and get into our feet. And that's one of the blessings of movement, where we can do something as simple as take our shoes off and just feel our feet in the grass and shift our weight a little bit and go side to side, and how bringing our attention down towards the ground is one of the easiest and simplest ways, and really important ways, that we can get out of the spin up here. So I'm liking the addition of gravity, to be able to feel gravity wherever we are, and it's very applicable that any of us can do any time of the day, whether we're driving or we're at work. And I think something that would be helpful, Susan, is, so let's say someone is in amidst their daily routine and they feel a little off, or they are noticing an uncomfortable feeling or sensation, they have an ache in their back, or they just got in an argument with their beloved, or whatever it is. What's something that someone could do in that moment to be able to even open the door to this world that you're inviting, inviting all of us to recognize, more or less, be home in?
Yes, yes. So whatever is going on, like we have a moment we bump with somebody, or we're having a strong sensation that's really taking over, like the primary amount of our conscious attention. And one piece is to come back in and actually really feel that, give room to feel the exact sensations, the movement of that, and where that's traveling, how it's displaying inside, to be able to feel that. But to be able to feel it with a wider frame of feeling, that there's more sensations going on. This is not the only thing occurring, even though it's taking up suddenly all of the body map, the consciousness map. It's never the whole story of what's going on. And so part of it is to be able to feel deeply, fully, this uncomfortable sensation that's arising within the context of more aspects of the somatic self and the hearted self, the self of kindness and the self of interest for what's occurring, and the self of compassion, the body of compassion. So again, like whatever position we're in, we're always receiving support somewhere. Some part of us is always touching in a dynamic relationship with gravity. And inside of our inner ear, we have these little stones, part of the vestibular system. And that's constantly telling us, as I begin to move, it's telling me unconsciously, where am I in the song of gravity? And so there's something about being able to move, to rock, to hold oneself and care for the bump energy, the sensations that have gotten a little off, the upregulating, the fear moment, the tension that's occurring, but to keep letting myself also feel like the deep, strong substance of the bones, the weight of them, the ground, and the context of the space that is holding me. That sometimes if I've had a bump with somebody, I just need to find out, what was that bump moment? What happened between us? And almost always there's an underlying need that just got triggered. A need for intimacy, for clarity, for communication, for a moment of contact, a moment to clarify. And it's also helpful in all those times to find underneath the uncomfortable sensation which need has just emerged and is kind of rippling some more challenging sensations.
So you're inviting people to bring their attention towards what's actually occurring internally, as well as to expand out to a wider view of what's occurring, similar to as you were describing with our senses, where we can narrow in on our visual field or auditory field, etc. And it sounds very similar to that, you know, we could feel a little flat or mentally foggy or emotionally funky and get very fixated on that experience and narrow in on it. So yeah, I can feel the expansion of breath in my body as I try on what you're inviting to. Basically, not that one needs to get rid of whatever is uncomfortable, however, to presence it within a wider scope, so that almost like that has more room to breathe.
Exactly. Thank you. You just renamed that really beautifully. It's just exactly like that. That capacity for vergence to come in, narrow in our consciousness, and to spread it out, to keep widening the attention. What else is occurring? And yes, I hold you deeply, this feeling. And here is a whole web of relations and feelings and sensations. And that capacity to consciously, with our attention, focus in and widen out creates like a breathing. It's a breathing with the planetary body. It's a breathing with a larger consciousness and with a larger awareness that helps us metabolize the moments when they occur, and it also helps us metabolize the luscious, yummy, have a creative ride moment where I have a new movement, a new feeling, a new sensation. All of that is helped by this capacity to focus in and widen.
And we can use our movement and our bodies and our breath in such a beautiful way with that, without even needing to understand what happened or why it happened or what exact emotion am I feeling right now. That none of that is actually necessary to create a shift, that we can literally expand our awareness field and breathe into it and move into it and open our bodies into it. That's where I love to use movement as one of my top tools to be able to shift whatever is going on internally, or not even necessarily shift, but to relate to it differently, because it's not about trying to make it different than it is. So I noticed how you were using your body as you were describing that and wanted to point that out. And I know you're about to go into a segment here of offering a guided movement journey for our listeners for about 25 minutes. And for those of you who have the opportunity, I highly recommend staying on here with Susan and getting to go into more of an experiential practice of using movement and bringing your attention into your bodies. And ideally, if you're in a space or a place where you can do that, to really kick off your shoes and get into gravity and bring your body into a comfortable position somewhere. Susan, I'm wondering if there's anything you want to let people know about around this guided experience you're about to step into.
No, I think that will be clear, but I just did want to say that I am with you. Like sometimes we can just through movement shift a state without needing to know which emotion. And sometimes our emotions are such physical wise guides. And I just wanted to say that sometimes then it's like the inner tracking to find out which affect has just gotten stimulated. It's helping communicate a deep, wise need for understanding or intimacy or communion or connection or clarity or honesty or authenticity. And so it's just how important the whole gamut, the whole entire range is.
Yes, absolutely. The honoring of our emotions and sensations is certainly valuable. I was more pointing out how to get into the analytical mind about what's occurring can take us away from our experience and yeah, to have instead the opportunity to meet what's occurring. So by all means, meeting the feelings and the sensations and getting to relate to it in a different way than what we're taught, because I know I can get into that old pattern of trying to figure it out with my mind of what's happening and da 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 da, versus to have that curiosity. Maybe I do discover what the origin was. However, when I'm in that more spacious, wider scope field of awareness, it is a very different way of tracking than using that gripping of some mental analysis.
Yeah, and deepening experience is really what it's about, is how we deepen and broaden and widen and just elaborate our capacity to experience. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for your beautiful, poetic, again, delicious descriptions of the human experience of being in a body. And I notice I feel more of a sensational, I feel more sensational after listening and receiving what you were sharing. So thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate you taking this time with us, and I'm excited to go into this next chapter here of having you guide us through one of your movement practices. Is there anything else you want to say as we close?
Just thank you so much for the opportunity and the pleasure of being in dialogue. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I do want to let everyone know, if you're interested in checking out more of Susan's work, you can go to her website at continuummontage.com and see where she's teaching next. She's got a full calendar of events there and teaches all over the place. So again, that's continuummontage.com. Continuum is CONTINUUM, montage, MONTAGE.com. All right. Well, thank you all for participating, and I hope everyone received something wonderful out of this, and I bless you all and enjoying being alive and the body that you're alive in. And thank you again for checking out the summit. Stay tuned for more.